All right. All right, Charles Feltman. um,
That's
ready
me.
to rock here. Thanks for coming on. This is great. When I was so a little bit of technical things going on before this one. Got to laugh about it. Um, what I was what I was going to say to you was I found you because of a friend of mine posted something on LinkedIn, and I texted him and just said like this is awesome, et cetera, et cetera. And I wrote to him. I said one thing that I've thought about in the past is how some people are able to build trust so fast. Like, what is it about them that people kind of gravitate towards? Is it storytelling, presence, confidence? What are some of those? What are some of the opposites of those? And then he immediately screenshotted your book, The Thin Book of Trust. So you were the first thing that came to mind for him when he brought up trust. So just thought it was interesting. I don't know. I mean, some of those questions that I was asking him, and he immediately sent me your book, and I reached out to you, and you were kind enough to send a copy, and I was able to read through it. So I'll stop rambling there. But how did you first? I'm curious, just with your background story, like what is the origin of you getting interested in the concept of trust, and then making that what you've studied for a career?
Well, let me just be clear. I didn't actually study it as a career. I'm an executive coach. I've been doing this for 25 plus years, working with leaders, executives, helping them become the best that they can be. So part of that, I think I've come to believe, is when somebody as a leader is doing really well, something that they can do really well is build trust. Not only build trust one on one with others or with a team, with a group of people, but also create the circumstances in which other people can build trust with each other easily. So to me, those people are exceptional trust builders, as I call them. They really have that dialed in. So how did I get started with all of that, along with my coaching career? Is that early on when I was just beginning to coach people, even then I began to notice that trust would often show up in the concerns and issues that my clients were dealing with. And I didn't at the time have a good way to support them in that. I just was doing the obvious stuff that you and I and anybody would, do in terms of helping them kind of work through those issues and concerns that they had. Then I took a coach training program that I thought would be useful, which it was tremendously. And it also allowed me to get a certification from the International Coach Federation, which was important. And in that program, I was introduced to this sort of this model of three different domains of trust. And it made a lot of sense to me. And I started using it with my clients, and I found that I was able to help them much more readily, having this little model that I could work with them around. And then probably a couple of years later, I came across there was something that had always been a little bit missing for me in this model of three different domains of trust. Wasn't sure what it was, didn't know where it was, how I was ever going to find it. Turns out I started reading the work of people who economists, psychologists, sociologists, neuroscientists who do research on trust and have their research published in peer-reviewed journals, which is great, but people like you and I don't often read those peer-reviewed journals, so we don't get to see this stuff unless somebody takes it and moves it over to something like Harvard Business Review and does a more popularized version of it. So I'm reading this stuff because I find it really fascinating, and I realize that these guys have the three domains of trust, or assessment domains, I call them domains of trust, that I had learned, plus one more that they commonly use in their research. And that one more they called benevolence. And I looked at it and said, this is the one that's missing. I get it. I just can't call it benevolence. So as we'll see in a few moments, I called it care. So I've been using that model of 4 domains of trust since probably around 2005. Yeah, probably around 2005 with my clients on a regular basis. And then in 2008, I got a call from a publisher who said, "Hey, we publish thin books for the business market, and I saw paper on your website, downloaded it, read it, and it's 8 pages, but we think it could make a great thin book for our market. And would you like to write one?" And I said, "Okay." Little did I know that writing a thin book is a heck of a lot harder than writing a thick book. I think, anyway. I kept wanting to try and make it into a thick book, and my publisher kept beating me over the head and saying, "We publish thin books, Charles, cut, cut, cut." So, but anyway, I got this book out, and it kind of took off on its own. And since then, I've developed a bit of a reputation as a expert on trust, and so I get a lot of my work now involves doing that and working with teams, working with leaders, groups of leaders around trust building. So that's kind of how I got to this point.
Absolutely. I was telling you that I'm thankful that it's 100 pages and not 300 because it's a lot better to read a short book, I think, than one that's 300, 400 pages. So with that said, you started to talk about those 4 assessments, and I thought it's super interesting. So they're care, sincerity, reliability, and competence. Can you just maybe touch on each of those and which one is maybe the most important out of the 4 of those that you found?
Yeah. I'd actually like to kind of go back a little bit prior to that and talk about how I define trust, because it relates directly to those 4 assessment domains. So I define trust as choosing to risk making something you value vulnerable to another person's actions. So there's this idea of vulnerability, right? Whenever we trust someone else, we're making something that's important to us vulnerable to them and their actions. And we're doing so because we believe that their actions are not going to harm what we're making vulnerable to them, whatever it is we value. And beyond that having trust with them will allow us to do things together that we haven't been able to do or can't do on our own. So there's this idea of risk and vulnerability and what it is that I value. So if I'm thinking about trusting someone, I'm actually thinking about taking a risk. And so how do I make an assessment about taking that risk? How do I decide, is this a risk worth taking? Can I do this? And now often, granted, our choice to trust somebody isn't that thoughtful. And that's often a problem as well. We just sort of go, okay, I'll trust them because, or whatever, or I'll just extend trust to them, and it's theirs. And if they damage it, I'm going to pull it back. So that's another way that people approach it. But anyway, there's this idea of risk assessment. So how do we make that risk assessment? Well, then this is where these 4 different trust domains come into play. I assess that someone is trustworthy in the domain of, well, let's start with care, because that's the one I did mention before. In the domain of care, I'm actually saying I trust that person has my back, that they have my interests in mind, as well as their own, when they make decisions and take action. They actually have concern for my well-being. So that's the domain of care, and trusting in that domain. It basically, I'm saying, yeah, this person really does care about me and my concerns and interests. So that's one. Another one is sincerity, which is kind of a combination of integrity and honesty. I'm saying I trust that this person is honest, that I can believe what they say, and that they will, their actions will conform to their words. In other words, if they say, if it's a team leader and the team leader says, I want this to be a high feedback team, everybody giving each other good, useful feedback when it's appropriate. And I'm a team member, I'm saying, okay, I can trust that I can do that. I can give other people in the team feedback, but more importantly, I can give the leader feedback. I can trust that what they say here, they're sincere about. Of course, they can blow that out of the water if the first time someone on the team offers them feedback that they don't like and they, rip that person to shreds. So there is that. We can damage trust in these domains as well as we can build it. The domain of reliability is about keeping the specific commitments or promises that we make to each other. So if I promise to show up at whatever time it is, 10 o'clock for this podcast and be ready to go, that's a commitment I've made to you. And so I do. I show up, and you can say, "Oh yeah, I can trust that guy. He's already shown me that he's trustworthy in the domain of reliability, at least in this one instance." And if I do that over and over again, you develop a strong sense of trust in me and my reliability. And then there's the domain of competence, which is that I trust that you have the skill, expertise, experience, resources, whatever necessary to either do the job I'm asking you to do or do the job you're saying you can do. So that's that's trust in the domain of competence. I can also build trust in the domain of competence if I don't know or I don't have the expertise or the skills, and I say so. I say, Joe, I really don't have the skill set to do X, Y, Z. I need help. That will tend to build trust in my ability to accurately portray my competence. So those are the four trust assessment domains. And so I'll stop there and see where that takes you. What questions are coming up for you?
Yeah, absolutely. So, what do the people that you've encountered, like the best leaders, what do they do to build the most trust? I mean, because I'm just thinking that, like, I'm thinking of coaches that I've played for in the past related to sports. Thinking of bosses that I've worked with or worked for in the past, and it immediately kind of brings up it's like a feeling, right? It's something that it's hard to quantify, but you just know that it's there. What in your experience do the ones who do it best? What do they do? Like, what are some of the characteristics that they embody?
Well, what I would say is, and I'll frame it with these four trust dimensions or trust domains. So leaders particularly, who build trust well and effectively do so, I think they pick a domain. You can start anywhere, but they're also somewhat attuned to what might be the more important trust domains for the person that they're relating to in this moment. Is this person really concerned about competence? Is that like a high value? I want to be able to trust your competence as a leader. In which case, as a leader, I would demonstrate what competence would look like in leadership. Is your concern my sincerity? Am I going to be honest with you? And I would do that. I would demonstrate by being honest in situations, start small situations, but build from there. Personally, I think most leaders get that the domain of care is really important for people, They want to feel like their leader has their interests in mind. And so there are certain ways you can build trust there that leaders may just intuitively understand this. But many leaders do, but also people that I've worked with, once they get the framework, they recognize, okay, care is really important. I'm gonna spend some time building trust in this domain, and some things that you can do there include listening well, and then including demonstrating that you've listened well by speaking back what the person has said, or at least summarizing it in a way that's clear you understood it. So listening well doesn't mean you need to agree with them, but you have listened to them and taken their concerns seriously. So you don't make fun of it or take it lightly and pass it off. Another one is helping your employee grow professionally. So helping them plot out a course of growth and development for themselves, and then supporting them in doing it, executing on that path. I had a boss once that said, kind of started off my first long conversation with her was in that conversation, she said, "So Charles," and I tell this to all of my employees, "I want you to be able to take my place, sit behind my desk if I leave and move on somewhere else. And so I'm going to give you all the tools you need to learn to do what I do along the way. I mean, obviously, you've got your own work to do, but I want to help you get to this point." I say it to all my employees. And of course, there's only one person when I do move on to somewhere else that's going to be able to take that on. And all of you can take these skills and go on to another job in another organization, or maybe even another job here as a leader at this level. So that when I heard that, I think, oh, I can really trust this person. She actually has my interests in mind here. So.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, if that's the first thing that a boss is saying to you, yeah, right off the bat, you're like, okay. But then it also has to be sincere, right? You have to know that she actually
Yes.
means she actually means that. He or she means
Yes.
that.
So she has to follow through.
Yeah, right.
Which
Exactly.
she did.
Yeah.
And so, yes.
Okay. Yeah. So has there been a time, I was just thinking about this, like for you, that you've distrusted, and I don't want to make their certain scenarios or anything, but that you've been able to like grow a relationship that might have been rooted in distrust and then change that and have that evolve, or I don't know whether that's you or just the people that you work with. Like, what is that? What does that look like?
Well, I've come up with lots of examples where clients of mine, leaders that I've worked with, have shifted and built trust where they didn't have it so much before with their teams or with individual direct reports, for example. In my own career and life, there's certainly been times when, let me think about one in particular, where I had a boss who I think didn't trust me because he, I think, was concerned that I wanted his job and would probably go to great lengths to get it. That wasn't actually what was going on for me. I wasn't, immediately the day I showed up to work for him, coveting his job. I was interested, and if certainly it had been offered to me, I would have taken it. But I was not trying to engineer that. And he, I think, was concerned that I was. So he had some trust issues with me, and I'm not sure what led to that, what gave rise to that. But Um, Over probably the course of 6 or 8 months working with him, by listening to him, by asking questions that demonstrated or saying things that demonstrated that I actually wanted him to succeed, not me to succeed him, but for him to actually succeed in his role, which was really sort of demonstrating care. Now that I look back on it, was demonstrating care. He began to change his opinion. He began to trust me more as we worked together. And I think that was really as a result of me demonstrating to him that I had his interests in mind in the situation. And I'm going to say this is going to sound weird. Maybe it won't to the people who listen to your podcast. I don't know. So lately, I've been, if I've always talked about trust as something that's really valuable for it creates greater productivity, or it's the foundation for greater productivity, better results. It actually, there's research that shows that teams and companies where there's high trust get stuff done done well. If they're responsible for part of the revenue generation, they do that better than teams where trust is low or even sort of in the middle. Lately, I've begun to take a look at trust as the foundation for joy and love at work. And you think about that team, that startup team that you were on. You may not have used these words, but I would bet that you could say that there was a lot of joy in working with that team, and that you loved the work and you loved the people you were doing it with. Would I be right?
Yeah, that would be fair. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And so for me now, a lot of the work I do with teams around trust building, or companies even around trust building, is yes, financial results. That's important for a company, and um, increasing the experiences of love and joy among the people who work on that team or in that company. And I think that interestingly also contributes to better results.
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, if you love what you're doing and you have joy, yeah, and oh man, yeah, that would exponentially increase your not your satisfaction, but like your contribution to the team as well. So that what you were just mentioning, so you were saying that creativity would increase, and that I know I jotted that down and what I'd sent to you, but I was curious about that, like trust and how it actually scientifically releases oxytocin in the brain. Is that right? I mean, when you're around somebody that
That's
you,
part of it. Yeah, oxytocin is one of the neurotransmitters that is released when we trust, or as we're developing trust with someone, or we're working with someone that we do trust. Um, so that's part of what I call the trust network. We talked about that before we started the podcast recording.
yeah,
So there's uh, neurobiologically speaking, um, I talk about the trust network, which is uses neurotransmitter oxytocin. There's also some other neurotransmitters and hormones involved in that, and certain brain structures. And then there's the distrust network, which involves adrenaline and cortisol, and is different brain structures, the amygdala, and so on. And so, really, what trust building is about, to some degree, is quieting the distrust network and amplifying the trust network. And when the trust network, which by the way also is associated with and uses the prefrontal cortex, which is where we're most creative, or can be most creative. So yes, I think that what happens when we trust the people we work with is that we relax. We begin to become more open, more vulnerable, more creative, innovative, because we feel there's it's people talk about it as psychological safety often now. That's just the new term. Um, Psychological safety is underpinned also by trust. Um, when I feel like I can really be myself, I can come up with my own, come out with my ideas, and people aren't gonna aren't gonna punish me for
Like being
coming out with an
scolded for
idea
doing it.
that's
Yeah.
maybe a little off the wall.
Hmm.
Um, then we all get creative together. Um, so yes, I think that trust is very important to the creative process,
Hmm.
not just of individuals, but of teams. In fact, more so of teams.
Sure. Yep. Yep. So Charles, one thing I was curious about, and I'm guilty of, is taking on too much. Right? You talk about that a little bit in the book. I think I like to think that I can take on a lot, and then there just ends up being certain things that I, if I don't um, if I don't keep that commitment, then it ends up then I lose trust in myself. That speaks like the self trust thing too. So what's the balance between taking on too much and maybe saying no to something, or just like how does that impact the
Well,
trust thing?
yeah, yeah. Now we're in the domain of reliability, the trust domain, assessment domain of reliability, of someone assessing that you are either they can trust you, you trust your reliability, or maybe not so much. Um, yeah, uh, and that's impacted directly by your capacity, right? Understanding what your capacity really is and working to sort of the edge or the frontier of your capacity without jumping over it, without knocking yourself outside of that boundary and into the place a place where you do not have the capacity to do everything that you've committed to. This is a huge problem in companies that I work in. Often one of the biggest areas that teams assess themselves and individuals assess themselves as struggling with is reliability and managing their capacity uh, in the context of all these requests coming in or demands coming in from all sorts of sources. And um, how do you say no? When do you say no? How do you renegotiate something when something comes in and you know you can't do it as it's requested? So how do you make a good counter offer on that? Most people don't do any of that stuff. They just go either yes, 99% of the time, and every once in a while a no. So first of all, understanding what your capacity is and and it's fluid, obviously. Sometimes you have excess capacity, just like any kind of system. There's excess capacity in the system, and then sometimes there's not enough. Oops, how do we manage that? So, trying to smooth that out as much as possible is the trick. But also recognizing that you have the ability to say no, or to make a counter offer to someone when they ask you to do something. The other side of that is recognizing how it is that you make offers. Because once you make an offer to someone and they accept it, they're going to hold it as a commitment that you've made to them. So now you have, you offer to, oh yeah, well look, I'll go thinking about yesterday, and my wife and I were talking about something, and I said, oh yeah, well I'll go out and trim that bush, right? So now she's of course expecting me to do it, right?
Yep.
Um, and I've also offered to my partner of mine that we do things and work together to contact two people and talk to them about something or other. And I'm okay. So those are three offers I've made, and they all are going to take some time. How careful was I? I was being reasonably careful. So I think actually I'm going to have the capacity to do all of these things without a problem. And that works out. But if I'm not careful, I can overpromise, whether in response to requests um, or demands from others, and or my own offers to people.
You overpromise and underdeliver.
That's
So
that's the ideal, right? We're
yeah,
no,
yeah.
no, it's the opposite of the ideal.
The opposite is the
Yeah, yeah.
ideal.
Oh,
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah, right, right. So so then say you do under overpromise and underdeliver, and somebody kind of or loses some of that trust in you. What are some ways that you can start to rebuild the trust with somebody?
yeah,
What are your thoughts
really
there?
important. Well, if they come to you and say, "Hey, what's going on? You didn't deliver as you promised. You committed here." First of all, you need to own it, right? Rather than try and blame somebody else or something else or whatever, but own it. Yeah, you're right. That was something that I did make that promise. I didn't come through as I had promised. So, yeah, I need to tighten that up. I apologize for the harm that's caused you, whatever you've had to do to adjust around that. I get it. It's not good. I'm sorry. And I need to, and I will be more careful next time when I make promises to you or make commitments to you, either based on your request to me or if I make offers to you, to be more careful about my ability to actually come through. So owning it, being accountable for what I did and didn't do, apologizing for the harm, whatever that might be, that's been caused, and promising to change. And then I have to follow through, right? Again, I have to follow
Of course,
through
you have to. Yeah.
and actually be more careful about the promises that I make or commitments I make to people.
Yeah, absolutely. How has have you experienced any of this? Like, how is remote work versus being in person? What's the effect on that? Because I work remotely a decent amount, and it's just a lot harder to. From my experience, it's been tough the last 5 years to communicate and to build those relationships, not being in person. So,
Yeah.
do you think that's sustainable, or do you almost need to be in person with people? Like, what do you think?
Well, so my recommendation to clients is if it's at all possible to have the team, whatever the team is, be in person with each other at least twice, if not four times a year, once a quarter. That's ideal. Can spend a couple days together, um, working through stuff, spending time in person together, bonding, those kinds of things, which helps when you go back out into your remote spaces and have to communicate over Zoom or whatever platform, Teams, whatever you're using. That does help a lot. I've seen it over and over again. I don't know if there's been any research on that, but just anecdotally, I can tell you that it helps a lot. Then, in terms of actually communicating back and forth with each other, having meetings over Zoom and so on, I think it's really up to the leader to a great extent to make sure that she or he connects with it, spends time with each of the people on the team. Uh, that so that the one-on-ones become more important, and also creates time for the team to spend time with each other that's non-structured, that isn't about the next task to do and the task that we just failed to complete well for whatever reason, and so on. So, and finally, I think it's incumbent on each of the people in your remote space to initiate conversations with other team members one on one. And outside of the team, whoever you need to work with, whoever you need to interact with, have conversations that, again, are you take some time during those conversations, or have separate, let's have coffee. Let's just set up a Zoom call and have coffee or have a beer together and talk. Um, that does help. And then I'll go back to what I said initially, which is the thing that helps the most is to have some in-person time on a regular basis, at least twice, if not 4 times a year. It costs money, and depending on the responsibility of the team and what the team is trying to produce, it can be well worth the cost, well worth the expense.
Yeah, that's got to definitely money well spent. I think, in my opinion. So, well, Charles, awesome. I was curious for your perspective. Like, who's the best leader that you've seen or maybe worked with? Is anybody that comes to mind? I don't know.
I've had the privilege of working with a lot of really good leaders, and one of the things that for me characterizes a good leader is their ability to build trust and to create an environment where other people can build trust with each other. But also for me, good leaders are leaders who are continually developing themselves, growing, challenging themselves. So they're not just sort of, okay, I'm in this position now, and I'm a leader, and so everybody should respect that, and so on. So I'll talk about a leader that I coached recently. Had pretty his overall group that he headed up was, I think, somewhere in the neighborhood of 150 people. He had a team of direct reports that I think was, if I recall correctly, 7 or 8. And what, again, made, from my perspective, I considered him a good leader was that he really did care about his people. And it was he genuinely cared about his people. Even someone on his team that I, as his coach, knew that he was struggling with, that wasn't performing to the level that he thought that person should be performing at. He, on the one hand, he wasn't going to just cut that person right away, because he considered it part of his responsibility to help that person grow into the role that he had. And he recognized that the person, was still young in that role. And so part of the problem, the significant amount of that problem that he had was from him. He hadn't actually given the person the direction, the tools, the support to grow yet. So he was willing to give the person the benefit of the doubt and work with them, which he did. And he did so successfully. So that over the time that I was coaching him, that person did grow in his role. And so did the other people on his team. Because in part, he really did genuinely care about them as human beings. He wanted them to be the best they could be, so he was constantly supporting them. And he was also he was challenging himself. Just the fact that he took up when the company made an offer to its top leadership of having a coach, he jumped on it right away. Said, I need this. I think I can benefit from it. And he did. So I would say that for me, he was a really good leader, continues to be a really good leader. He continues to challenge himself to grow and learn.
Yep. That's awesome. So it all comes that care. I know that's, I think you said, right, that's kind of, if the care is not there, then it doesn't really matter if the sincerity, reliability, or competence are there. It's like the people have to know that you genuinely care about them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You can have trust that's transactional, right? That, but you have to build it all over again at every transaction. And you have to build enough trust that this other person will trust that the transaction is going to be, it's going to happen, it's going to work. But it's no way to run a company, no way to run a team, in my opinion, at all. Uh,
Sure. Yeah, definitely. So, well, Charles, I did, if you don't mind, just wanted to ask you one more thing, just kind of related to the theme of my podcast, which is kind of former athletes who are transitioning into that next part of life, whether it's like business or just whatever it is. So, do you have any advice, maybe, or thoughts for them, whether that's a college graduate, like college athlete that's
yeah.
gonna be getting that first job and needs to build trust with everybody around it, like just that specifically? Do you have any advice for those people?
I would say a couple of things. One that comes to mind. I've never been. I was not a team athlete. My chosen sport was surfing, which is not a team thing.
All right. Well, that's still, yeah, it's still
So
a
I
sport
can't
that you
really
got to
speak
perform.
to the team experience other than what I've learned from talking to other people who have been team athletes over the years. Um, but I think one thing that I would want to say to someone who's coming from either uh, college level or professional level sports is the experience of being on it, the experience of trust of the people on your team is intense. It's present. It's you get to test it every time you go out in the field. It's really uh, it's tangible in a direct and immediate way. And I would say that that's not quite the case so much in corporate America. So as you're making that transition, just be aware that it's not going to be, at least initially, if you run a team or you're on a team, it's probably not going to be quite that intense and quite that um, obvious. So don't let that defeat you. Don't go into it and go, oh my God, this is not. I loved the kind of trust that we had on the field and with my team, and it's not happening here. So I'm kind of like, what's going on? So that's one. The other one is I'm going to talk about a woman I met really early in my career within a company. I worked for 10 years in Silicon Valley in a couple different companies. And the first company I worked with, I was, had the opportunity at one point to go out into the field and talk to some customers with a woman who had been top salesperson of the year for like 3 years running or whatever it was, for as many years as she'd been at the company. And so I had the opportunity to ask her as we were driving to the customer side, hey, what, how do you, what do you do that allows you to be such a really good salesperson? Expecting to, I wasn't quite sure what I was expecting, but what she told me has stuck with me ever since. She said, well, in every interaction, I try to attend to two things. One is to move the task further along the track, whatever that track is. So we're moving the task further, and equally important, strengthen trust and the relationship and the trust in the relationship. And that was a huge and as I think about it over the years, it's gotten even more important. It's gained even more relevance, I think, for me because, and sometimes it's mostly about the task, but a little bit about building trust and relationship. And sometimes the interaction is all about, or almost all about, building trust and relationship, and just a little bit about moving the task forward. But doing both in every interaction is, I think, the way to really uh, build the kinds of relationships that make work work. Just leave it at that.
That is some really good advice. Yeah, that's hard to do though too. That's a balancing act that you have to. I mean, I'm sure she had some innate ability, but probably worked on that
Yeah,
all the time, right? I
yeah,
mean, because
yeah,
yeah, it's hard to keep, especially if you're a salesperson like that. You're like, all right, my job is to sell, but keeping that in mind that it's you're only going to do that if you can have that relationship too, right? I
Yeah.
mean, that's not easy to do. So
Right.
pretty cool. Pretty cool. All right, Charles. Well, thank you for your time. This was awesome. And just the concept of this is like, I don't know, because it really is present in every single, pretty much every interaction that you have, right? Is built on, do I trust this person? Do I trust them enough to make myself vulnerable, like you said, and share more about things? So I just enjoyed reading it. I don't know if there's any last thoughts maybe you wanted to share, or just where folks can get
Yeah.
the book, et cetera.
Yes.
That'd be great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, they can get the book from Amazon. They can get the book from Barrett Kohler Publishers,
Okay.
which is the publisher of the book, and you can get quantity discounts if you want to order 10 or more. They offer a really nice quantity discount. Um, so that's, I think, kind of cool. And that's actually how a lot of the books are sold. Somebody, like the VP of or the COO in a company reads the book and says, "This is great. I want everybody in my, all of my direct reports to read it." And the direct reports read it, and then they go, "Oh, hey, let's get this for the entire department."
Yeah.
So there's that. But there's something else I want to share that has more to do with trust again than with selling the book, getting the book out there, which I'm really I find that important because I think the book actually helps people. So I want to get it out. I don't make a lot of money on the book, but what I do get is that people get value from it. And here's the other thing that I want to say about trust itself. Trust is not binary. So often I find that people think about trust as either I trust this person completely or not at all. And so maybe I extend trust to them initially, and then they do one thing in one trust domain. If you wanted to isolate it to a trust domain, you could do that easily enough. They do one thing that I find untrustworthy, and so now I'm in a position of writing them off completely because it's either on or off. It's like a light switch, and that's not how trust works, or it doesn't have to work that way. You lose good relationships, sacrifice good relationships to that idea, and that idea is faulty. And that's one of the benefits of having the 4 trust domains is you can say, okay, I can trust this person actually does care about me. I can trust that they are competent. I can trust they're sincere. They're having a problem in the domain of reliability about getting stuff done on time. So either I can have a conversation with them about that. That's the best, I think, the best way to go. Or at the least, I can sort of build a boundary around that for myself so that I don't get burned by it. And still trust them in other ways.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Yeah, that's interesting because I think I probably think of it as binary. You like you said, you write the person off. Maybe that's how people. I don't know. I feel like that's how a lot of people probably think, right? That it is. I can either trust this person or I don't trust them. Trust them as far as I can throw them. So yeah. But
I do workshops with groups of leaders, and I'll have people come up afterwards and tell me, wow, that was a real eye opener for me. I never realized that, but of course, yes, I get it. So
interesting. Well, good deal, Charles. Well, yeah. Thanks again for the time. Again, the book, The Thin Book of Trust, Essential Primer for Building Trust at Work. Really good read, easy read for people like me whose attention spans are only so long. So
I wrote it for people like me too.
There you go. All right. Well, thanks again, Charles. Excited to put this out there for people. I think it definitely helped. Enjoy talking to you.
Thank you, Joe. I've enjoyed talking with you as well.